Hello, and welcome to Leeds Echoes. In this series, I'll be exploring different aspects of Leeds' rich history. Each episode, I'll tell a different story, whether it's a particular building, an entire industry, a lost transportation network. But most importantly, I want to try and figure out how the people that lived and breathed this history felt. What did the local butcher think? Or your neighbour? What did the city sound like? And what did it smell like? These are the kind of things I really want to explore in this series, and I'm really excited where the journey's going to take me. Hopefully I'll see some of you on the way. This week, I wanted to try something a little different. A particular incident I accidentally stumbled across during previous research that I've become utterly fascinated by. This episode, we're going back to 1919, and we're going to talk about the murder of a young woman on the Leeds Liverpool Canal. Edith Shepherd was found by a passing boatman on May the 12th, 1919. She was dead. Her body was floating in the canal behind Armley Park, where the bank falls steeply to the water. Sadly, this was not uncommon. From what I can tell from reading endless newspaper transcripts from 1880 to 1920, a body being found in either the canal or the river, or both, was essentially a daily occurrence. A lot of the time it was tragic accidents. Young children playing near the river unsupervised was common. So many more people worked on the water too, both the river and the canal. An endless stream of boats were constantly navigating in and out of the city. And the work was dangerous. The complete lack of any protective clothing, the total absence of any health and safety rules. So many of the accidents I read just felt tragically avoidable. But hindsight is a powerful thing. And occasionally, such as in the case of Edith, it was murder. Now, what was interesting to me about this case is they had a clear suspect who was arrested and brought before Leeds courts, but ultimately he got away with it. Why? Sexism, a lack of medical and forensic science, all resulting in essentially a lack of conclusive evidence. It's the absolute abundance of circumstantial evidence, however, that's so compelling. Herbert Isaac Shepherd, 28, of 174 Kirkstall Road, was arrested on the 15th of May 1919 by Detective Inspector Watson of Leeds City Police. When charged, the accused man made no reply. But what had led to Leeds City Police arresting Herbert Shepherd? They had undertaken local inquiries after discovery of the body to attempt to trace Edith's last known whereabouts and movements. Mr. E. O. Simpson, prosecuting on behalf of the Crown, outlined in the trial that Edith had been last seen alive at about 9:15 p.m. on Saturday the 3rd of May. Her body wasn't discovered until 9 days later. Medical testimony given at the trial showed her cause of death to be syncope produced by shock, not drowning, and showed that the shock could be caused by sudden immersion in the water, the woman being in a state of pregnancy. Essentially, a doctor has stood up in a court and said that this woman has clearly died from shock, of falling into 3 feet of cold water, such as their fragile nature. This is where the lack of modern science and just the overwhelming bullshit of the patriarchy come into play. And yes, the sad additional fact that poor Edith was carrying a child the night she was murdered. And who was Herbert to Edith? Well, he was her husband. Herbert had married the then Edith Darnborough on August the 1st, 1914, and the couple lived at 10 Bramley Street. Herbert worked at Viaduct Tannery a building which still exists today, just. It's on Viaduct Road across from Temple Coffee and Donuts. In October 1914, Herbert enlisted in the Coldstream Guards, the oldest continuously serving regiment of the British Army. He was discharged for medical reasons shortly after, but he then re-enlisted in the Royal Engineers and was finally demobilised in January of 1919, where he returned to Bramley and Leeds to live with his wife Edith. This was where things began to turn sour. It transpired that whilst away in the army, Herbert had spent time at a military hospital in Eastbourne, where he had fallen for another woman, Ethel Lillian Teague. Herbert had introduced himself to Ethel as a widower, even though he wasn't, and proceeded to marry Ethel, whilst his existing wife Edith remained unaware in Leeds. After leaving the army and returning to Leeds, Edith discovered his affair, and he moved out of their home in Bramley into lodgings on Kirkstall Road. On May the 2nd, the night before Edith's death, Herbert was seen coming from the immediate neighbourhood of their former home in Bramley where Edith still lived. Other witnesses claimed to have seen him enter the house specifically a short time before. The following morning, Edith was seen at various times during the day by friends and neighbours and was described as being in the best of health and spirits. Had Herbert really visited her the night before? If so, what could they have discussed that had left Edith feeling so elated? She was then seen around 7 p.m. on the evening of her murder, dressed and ready to go out. At 9 p.m, she was seen boarding a number 15 tram heading towards Leeds. She alighted the tram on Stanningley Road and was seen walking between Cocksholt Lane and Ridge Road at around 9:15 p.m. At around exactly the same time, Herbert was seen a few hundred metres further down Stanningley Road, stood at the entrance to Redcoat Lane. He was reported to be stood in the manner and attitude of a man waiting for someone. And that was as far as their movements could be traced. It was assumed that Edith had continued walking and had met Herbert, whether she knew he was there or not. A short walk via a footpath off Redcoat Lane leads to the spot where Edith's body was found. It seems safe to assume, and the prosecution thought so, that the two met and walked this same route. And what happens next is a mystery, but Herbert had an overwhelming amount of motive. The police had unearthed correspondence between Herbert and Ethel, the woman he'd illegitimately married in Eastbourne, and he was trying to plan a life with her. And poor Edith was the only thing standing in the way of his new life. And on top of that, she was pregnant. More than likely with his child, but again, whether Edith knew this was a mystery, but it feels like a horrid coincidence to ignore. Around 10:30 p.m. the same night, a signalman on board a train on the Midland Railway, which runs right by the spot, heard screams coming from the canal. He opened his window and listened further, but hearing no more, and such noises not being unusual to him, he paid no more attention to the matter. It was 9 days before a passing boatman on the canal discovered poor Edith's body. 4 days before this, Detective Inspector Wright of Leeds City Police had interviewed Herbert. He denied having seen his wife since April 19th. He also denied having been seen at Bramley the night before her death, and he also denied having been seen on Stanningley Road the night of her death. The following day, during a subsequent interview with detectives, Shepherd asked, "Supposing anything has happened, what will become of the home? I have been allowing her 12s a week and I have been keeping her mother." A few days later, when Edith's body was found, there was a document found in her purse. On it was written, "My will. If anything happens to me, I leave everything to my husband. All my household effects to him and no one else. Mrs. H. I. Shepherd, 10 Bramley Street, Bramley, Leeds." The handwriting was identified by Edith's brother to be hers. Did Herbert meet Edith that night and force her to write that note and place it in her purse before killing her? It seems odd that had this been written before, that she would still carry such a thing around. Indeed, it was odd for anyone to carry something like that in their purse at all. Herbert claims that he spent the afternoon of May 3rd, the day of the murder, in the New Inn on Kirkstall Road. He then went to Leeds Market, then to Briggate Picture House, and around 8:30 p.m. he saw a film. He left shortly after and arrived home at 10 p.m. Herbert's landlady, Mrs. Preston, confirms that when she returned home at 10:30 that night, Herbert was indeed at home. His home on Kirkstall Road was a 5 or 10 minute walk from where Edith's body was found. If he did indeed kill her sometime after they met around 9:15, he would have had plenty of time to get home by 10:30. The prosecution also presented evidence that Herbert had also arranged to meet with another girl named Lily Penn the night of Edith's murder. However, she allegedly stood him up. It seems Herbert was quite the Edwardian fuckboy. And it seems like Edwardian Britain was mostly on Herbert's side. His defense during the trial asked the doctor presenting medical evidence that if Edith was in fact carrying an illegitimate child that wasn't Herbert's, would she be in a more nervous state and therefore more likely to have died? Dr. Woodcock agreed. When Mr. Justice McCarty asked if any further evidence was to be presented, both prosecution and defense fell silent. Was there, on the woman's body, any sign of the pressure of a man's hand? He asked. No, replied the prosecution. What evidence is there that the couple actually met? Continued Justice McCarty. It is a matter of inference that they would have met if the woman had continued walking in the direction she was going, argued the prosecution. I am not satisfied that the evidence which it is proposed to adduce would be adequate either in law or in fact to support an evidence of murder, responded Justice McCarty. And with that, he ordered the jury to return a verdict of non-guilty, which they duly did. And so Herbert most likely got away with murder. He was found guilty on charges of bigamy for the second wife and ordered to a year of hard labour, probably at Armley, but I can't be sure. I can't find any concrete trace of Herbert after that. Now, I find this particular case so fascinating because it feels so familiar in some ways, but so alien in others. This sordid tale of betrayal and heartbreak feels so at home still in today's world, but with one difference. The likelihood of being caught and convicted for such a crime was so much lower in 1919. It must have felt genuinely quite easy to get away with murder. And I can't help but wonder how much that impacts our behaviour today. Do we behave better now because we are better? Or because we're more likely to get caught? Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Leeds Echoes. If you liked it, let me know, and hopefully there'll be some more soon. In the meantime, stay safe and take care.